This is a launch. This is a launch we did from Mill Creek Elementary of a Pico balloon. Only this is the SBS-13, a large balloon. It's made out of sushi wrap. It is about 3.5 feet by 3 foot wide by 7.5 feet long, about the size of a leaf bag. But it's made out of this sushi wrap, which is designed to keep air out of sushi to keep it fresh. But it's also very good about keeping hydrogen and helium inside for months and, in fact, years on end, particularly if you use hydrogen. So we used helium because we're doing a big school event, and basically the rule of thumb, if there's going to be a lot of students at close range, I use helium, but anything else is what I use hydrogen because it just works better and it goes higher. And it keeps the gas in it a lot longer using hydrogen. So we did this from a 5th grade STEM class. Did you ever see that show, Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader? There's hardly anybody smarter than these 5th graders. Of course, most of their parents are rocket scientists, but Jackie Smith, KJ4SVQ, she does a great job teaching these kids about space and science, and they know all kinds of neat stuff about everything. So this is the launch we did with one of my SkyTracker Pico balloon payloads. And that's how easy it is to launch a little Pico balloon with a small payload. And it only used about 4 cubic foot of helium, which in these days, and the high cost of helium, that is a real savings cost. Yes?
Is it possible to use the toy balloon helium you buy at Walmart?
It is possible, but the balloon time tanks of helium, they're very lightweight. They look like a little propane tank. They're pink in color. They're about $25 to $29 at Walmart or at Dollar General. But about 2 years ago, they worked great. They decided when the helium shortage started to raise the cost of helium, their solution was to mix about 20% of air in it with it. So now it's 80% helium instead of about 98%. And I noticed that the balloons were flying about 3,000 feet lower than I expected. And then I looked close in the very fine print. It said, special blend, environmentally safe. And I called them up. They're based out of Columbus, Ohio. And I said, what's up with this? Oh, well, we came up with this new formulation that is environmentally safe, and it won't affect your performance at all. Well, maybe if you're just holding a birthday party, it might not affect it, but it certainly did for us. And they weren't interested at all in working with me and coming up with special batch of helium tanks with pure helium, because they manufactured the tanks and everything there. It's one-time use, and they've got a special valve that is one way only. You can't fill them back up. You can, but you have to do a lot of work. You have to drill out this one-way valve, and but because it'd be very convenient. But I do have a solution for that, which I'll show on my slideshow. So, how many of you have landed in a tree? I know you guys in Colorado are fortunate and there aren't many trees in eastern Colorado, but when I fly in Colorado, I'll find a tree or a cornfield. I mean, everybody else, we can fly 10 balloons, but mine will find the tree. I have a tree sensor in my payloads. So this is how we launched that one you saw just now. That balloon was overfilled, and so it popped. And it came down slowly into Kennesaw, Georgia, next to my friend Ralph N4NEQ, who has recovered quite a few of my balloons over the past. And I said, Ralph, we changed our mission from around the world to balloon mail to Georgia. And we told the students that. We've changed it, you know, so it's sometimes when your mission, one parameter fails, you just have to say, what can we do as a backup? So he went out and he located it. It was about 3 miles from his house. The guy who owned the house, it was 60 feet up in the tree. And he knocked on the door. The guy is a fireman. In fact, he was in charge of the tanker truck. So he says, I have a solution. We're going to do a training exercise. And so he rounded the guys up in the firehouse, and they did a little training exercise, and this is what they came up with. There it goes. I'll have to run that back. Okay, here we go. Now that's the way to do a tree recovery.
Did you bring them with you?
Yeah, we could definitely use their help. Yeah, that's pretty much what the exercise was. And there we go. We need those on every flight, I believe.
You know, if you put a cat sound in your balloon set.
Yeah, that's what we should do. So I'm going to tell you what I've been up to in Pico balloons this past year. You saw that before in past GPSLs, but it's totally solar powered. There's a laser pointer here. Oh, there it is. GPS receiver, that's a U-Blox Max 7Q or the Max 8Q. Those are the two I've been using lately. I get those from UPU and M0 UPU, Anthony Stirk out of Great Britain. They're really hard to come by in America because they want $99 a piece unless you buy 1,000 of them. Over in Great Britain, they're about $13 a piece from Anthony. That's after you calculate, then a little postage on top of it. But they average out about $15 a piece if you buy 20 of them. Yes?
DigiKey is stocking now. They're a little bit more expensive, but you can get them.
How much are they at DigiKey?
I think they're around 20, 18, 20, something like that.
Okay. Well, I'm still ahead of the game by getting them from Anthony. Even after the postage, they are about $14 or $15 a piece if I buy 10 or 20 of them. So, but that's good to know. I didn't realize DigiKey now stocks them. Now, I have ordered them from China, but you run the risk. Did you not buy some from China? What was your story on that?
I bought a run of 10 of them from AliExpress, and they were fake chips. So they looked real, and I threw them in my parts bin because I didn't need them right away. And when I pulled them out 9 months later to put on, I found they weren't working, and then I noticed that all the barcodes on every label were identical. The barcode was supposed to be a serial number, and they were just slightly different shape. They were all junk, and I blew it because I hadn't used them. I threw them in my parts bin. I missed my chance to protest it through AliExpress, so I don't do business with AliExpress anymore. But
Well, you might, because that's where I get these clear balloons.
yeah, you gotta be careful where you get your chips.
Yes, yes. So that's the risk you take from China. In fact, one friend bought some as well from another vendor in China, and they were actually bigger. They wouldn't even fit the footprint, and the ink on the top just came off with just alcohol, just came right off. So they just printed a bunch of labels and put them on a fake part. So I get them from, he gets them from Switzerland where they're manufactured, and I get them from Anthony Stirk, and I can give you his information. UPU Tronics, I believe this is the company. Now, we were talking about the balloon time tanks, and my solution is to go to the local mom and pop welding shop, and I get a 40 cubic foot tank of helium or hydrogen, and it's pretty reasonably priced. It's compared to buying a 200 cubic foot tank of hydrogen, it's not cost effective. But for these Pico balloons, carrying a little tank like this into a school, they're not that much heavier than one of those convenient balloon time tanks. One person can easily carry this tank, and the school is very happy when you bring in a little tank. Try and bring a big tank that's painted red into a school, and the administrators tend to get a little antsy about that. So this is school friendly. I can get, it takes about 1 or 2 cubic foot for a party balloon flight. So I can get 20 Pico flights out of this. And it's cost $10 a month rental if you keep it, but if you turn it back within the month, there's no rental fee. And I think it cost me about $30 worth of helium on it, which is better than paying for a 300 cubic foot tank of helium nowadays. So that's one solution. I get this from my local welding supply house, and they get it from Airgas. I think you'd probably go to Airgas and get them too, but just ask for a 40 cubic foot tank, and they also have a 60, and then they'll do it for you. And of course, it takes the regular regulators. You could use one of those party balloon regulators and just use the little rubber hose on it too. And sometimes they'll rent you those or just give you one, loan you one free. That's all it takes to launch a Pico balloon. That's the silver Mylars, which are made by Qualitex. A little comment about them. The 2016 batch weighs 38 grams. They work fantastic. They'll stay up 2 weeks on helium and about 3 or 4 weeks on hydrogen, and they can go around the world. And if you can stack 2 of them, Mike, you've been around the world with 2 of them, right? Yep. And they work great. Well, the 2016 batch went away, and then I got another batch in because I went through my first batch of 20 or 30 of them. And they cost about $3 or $4 a piece, depending on where you get them from. Balloonsfast.com is where I get them currently, and Balloons Direct is where I was getting them. A 2017 batch comes in, they weigh 33 grams. I say, great, 5 grams lighter, they're going to go a lot higher. They do go a lot higher, but they don't stay there. They're about 20% success rate, and the rest of the time they just pop and come right back down. Even if they do float successfully, they only last a couple of days. So although we did have one flight from California that made it all the way to Turkey, and it stayed up a good 10 days. So very variable. I think they reduced one of the layers of plastic that they used in the balloon, and they were not reliable. So then I got a batch of 2018s in. They're also 38 grams again. So I think they went back to their old manufacturing style. These are made by Qualitex. And the 2018s work just as well as the 2016s. We had one go to Japan, launched from Alabama just recently. So they work great, and it stayed up for, over 14 days on helium. So how far can they go? This is a current flight that is flying by VE3 KCL, Dave. He calls it U3B-25. If you go to the HabHub site, which is tracker.habhub.org, which shows all the balloons flying currently in the world, you'll see his flight is currently heading up into the Hudson Bay. He's running 20 meters and 30 meter whisper mode for his flights. And he's been around the world for about 7 times. He's been up about 3 months. And instead of flying on that SBS-13 that can cost about $130, $150, that sushi wrap balloon, he's using one of these. This is actually 2 balloons, I believe. Well, wait a minute. Well, that's just one. So anyways, this is from AliExpress. It's a clear plastic balloon, and it's made out of very good material, and that's what he's flying. These cost about $2 or $3 a piece after postage. And filled with hydrogen, they last an incredible amount of time. And the only difference between that and those Mylar party balloons from Qualitex is you have to use a sealing iron on these. They don't have the adhesive on them. So you'll have to do a little heat iron once you get the gas into them. But that's the latest and greatest. Now, Chinese quality control being what it is, it would be wise for you to do a little pressure test on them, because some of them do have holes in them, and or bad seams on them. So we might want to look for the best one of the batch and make sure, do an overnight test and make sure they maintain pressure. What Dave does is to inflate them to, I think, about 0.25 psi over ambient, and holds them there, and it pre-stretches them. He can, with the Qualitex balloons, you can only put about 3 grams of free lift. If you put much more than that, they're going to pop. If you get much less than 2 grams, they won't float well. But with these balloons, after you pre-stretch them, if you don't pre-stretch them, you can put about 5 grams of free lift, which actually is a lot. That's a whole nickel's worth of weight. You can put 8 grams or more into them if you stretch them first. And that way you achieve an excellent super pressure in the envelope with that much free lift, and you can get a flight like this. So I have not tried these, I just got these in. So we might try one for the super launch. Maybe 1 or 2, and see how they work.
If you want to stretch a balloon like that, it's advisable to use nitrogen
Yes.
than air, just to keep the moisture out.
Yeah, you don't want to just use compressed air. You get a little tank of nitrogen and use that.
Bill,
Yes?
what's that track that leaves Africa on the right side? Leaves Africa, goes up to Scandinavia, it just seems to go up.
I'm not sure about that one. I think it went up there and then lost track for a couple of days and shows up again over here. I think it went up and over. There was probably a day or 2 gap over there.
So, I know you said, but I didn't quite catch the difference between 5 grams and 8 grams of lift is.
Oh, 5 grams if you don't pre-stretch it.
Right, but does the 8 grams give you
A better super pressure. Won't affect your altitude. In fact, you go down a little lower, but you'll have a better super pressure to maintain turbulence and storms.
Okay, so
If it can handle that
if
much.
you can handle it, it's better to have a little bit more.
Yeah, but there's a point where it's just going to pop when it goes up to altitude if you put too much in it. Free lift, of course, meaning more lift than the payload. So you basically would attach your payload to the balloon, stick a nickel on it temporarily, and if it's neutrally buoyant, you're good to go. I have a little weight bag I clip on it when I'm inflating them, and when it's neutrally buoyant with that weight, which I measure out to be the payload plus 5 grams, or in the case of the Qualitex's payload plus 3 grams, then it's going to float neutrally buoyant in the room. Or I just measure on a scale to be more accurate. I get one of these $10 fractional gram scales from Amazon, and it's the AWS 100 is what I use. It's $9 on Amazon. And that, I just look at the lift, I put a weight on it and have the balloon lift the weight and then measure, I tear it out to 0 and then look at the negative weight on the scale, and then I get the precise lift. And that's actually the best way to do it. But if you're at a school and you don't have a lot of time, then the weight bag, neutrally buoyant. And they like to see the balloon just hanging there in front of you. That always impresses them. So we did a flight out of Coleman, Alabama, with West Point Middle School 6th graders. We had the entire 6th grade class. And that's Bev Teeter, WB4ELK, and she's watching today. Hi, Bev. She couldn't make it today. And she helped get the balloon ready, and her grandkids are in this school. And there it goes. You can see it flying off right up there at the top there in the clouds. It was a very windy day. There it is. But we went next to the school because there's trees all around. And when it's very windy, I can launch a 2-meter version because it's only 19 inches up and down of a guitar string. And so we can launch that in upwards of 20-knot winds, but you better make sure you've got about 1,000 feet distance clearance before trees and power lines. We didn't have that clearance, but I reasoned that there'd be an updraft over the school building. So, and that's exactly what happened. It hit the school and off it went. And because we had about a 15-knot wind.
One question, the balloon you're passing around has the fill area at one end, and the other end has got some tab that's closed off.
That's used to tie it up on a ceiling or something. You don't use that end. So there's all the sixth graders, and they had a blast. And I actually asked them a question about who was the first man to land on the moon. Most of them got that right. They actually knew who the second person who landed on the moon was. And I'd say a good half the class. And I turned to the teacher, I says, "That's very impressive." And she said, "I do my job very well." So that particular flight went all the way from Cullman, Alabama to Morocco. And it actually was picked up by an APRS station in the Canary Islands over here, because there's no APRS ground stations in Morocco or the Sahara Desert. But right over here, actually beyond the rain circle, we were being picked up in the Canaries. And he's up on the side of a volcano and has a gain antenna. And EA8 BFK, I think it was. So I often get reception when we fly over the Canary Islands or the Azores. We actually got a tour of the islands on this flight because we actually had a good report over the Azore Islands. We overflew them directly. And their frequency is 144.800, the European frequency. So I have to make sure that my board is frequency agile, and I do a geofence around each area of the world where there's a different frequency, and it changes the frequency to their frequency. So Europe's 144.8, China is 144.64, and Japan's 144.66, and South Korea is 144.62. Why they didn't move 20 kc one way or the other and make it all the same, I don't know. But so I had three frequencies just for China, South Korea, and Japan. Now, we did a Pico balloon flight at the Dayton Hamvention. Terrible conditions in 2018. You see Bev, WB4ELK over there with her friend Yvette, getting ready to launch it near the food court. And Joe in 8QOD, he does a great job organizing the balloon flights from the Hamvention. We've done a balloon flight of one shape or another, Pico balloons and latex balloons, for the past 12 years or more at the Dayton Hamvention. Every Hamvention, we try and get a balloon up in the air. This one, some of you saw this from last year, but this one went right over the one of the halls. They hold it at the county fairgrounds now. And the Dayton Ham Station has a big hex beam. Do you know what those look like? They look like a spider web about 100 feet up in the air. Well, it's also a good balloon catcher. I mean, if we had tried to hit this intentionally, it would have been 1,000,000 odds. And it stuck there for probably a good 30 minutes while they rotated the hex beam and they lowered the tower up and down and shook it around. And it just kept getting worse and worse tangled up. And so they were going to lower it all the way down and get a ladder, and we were going to pull it out of the beam when it fell out. Just a miracle. It just unwound and took off again. Then it hit a power line and hung there for about 2 minutes. And then it cleared the power line, went up in the air. It was a terrible day because there was thunderstorms all over the region. We just had a little clearing for about 30 minutes. We get about an hour into the flight, it hits a thunderstorm, and knocks it all the way down to about 700 feet above the ground. And it came back and survived. Made it all the way. 11 days later, it went all the way to Turkey and came down to the Black Sea. We did another balloon sat forum at this year's Dayton Hamvention. We were out in a tent, forum room 5, and we filled the tent. And in fact, that's Mike, KD2EAT, giving a talk there at the Hamvention. So there's a lot of interest in balloon sats in the general amateur radio community. We always get a packed house at the Dayton Hamvention for the balloon sat forum, and we've been doing the balloon sat forum for 15 years or more now. So we decided it was a beautiful day, but extremely windy. It was about 15, 20 knot winds, which is definitely above the speed limit I recommend for these things. But it was a clear day, so we had to do it. So we did 4 balloons. Is AK0SK here today? Jacob? He's from Kansas City area. He launched the first balloon, which is W8BI-11. And KH6JJD launched W8BI-12, which is the DARA, Dayton Amateur Radio Association's call sign. And W8BI-13 was launched by David, KC5UYR. And this is a first, I believe. We actually had an astronaut launch a ham radio balloon. Astronaut Doug Wheelock, who has been on the space station twice, KF5BOC, launched the 4th balloon, which this was called W5KUB-3. And that's W5KUB on the right there. He does a weekly radio show on Skype video that you can tune into every Tuesday night at 8. And he's been excited about ham radio balloons and has been promoting them on his talk show for the past month or 2. So this is the results of the balloon race. This is the 2nd day of the race. We're off the coast of Cape Cod. And curiously enough, they were all in the same order as we launched them, except that if you backed off the times, because they all ended at a little different time, because several of them had power saving modes and some I didn't. I was testing the different GPS power saving modes. And so actually W5KUB just barely beat out W8BI-13 by like about half a mile. So, but they stayed a pretty good grouping. They're about 20 miles apart after 2 days, which is pretty incredible after flying all the way to Cape Cod from Ohio. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Polish version of GPSL. I had the opportunity to go all the way to Toruń, Poland, which is the home of Copernicus. I figured that was appropriate for near space to be launching from the hometown into Copernicus. And it was all organized by Maciej Jakimek on the left there. And you get to see there's a group from Czechoslovakia and Poland launching balloons. We launched 2 latex balloons and a Pico balloon. And that's SP6ZWR on the right. And here's some of the speakers. They had people that were trying to launch an actual hot air balloon into the jet stream, and what it took with the special burners to get the propane to burn at that altitude was incredible. But they got up to about 30 to 36,000 feet or so on a hot air balloon. So that's the fellow on the right there. And I don't know who that guy is in the second picture there. Bill Brown. That doesn't sound like a Polish name, but I do have the NASA hat on, yeah. So they held it at the Science Center in the center of the town of Toruń, and it was just a wonderful place, a great environment, big screen, and they had one of those Foucault pendulums that is right behind me on the right there as I inflated the Pico balloon. So their call sign for their Pico balloon was SR0FLY. And that's what the Copernicus project is, the name of Maciej. That's his balloon group. And he flies a number of latex balloons. This group was really fantastic. They're all high school juniors and seniors. It's called 3SAT. And they are doing a balloon launch glider, glider return, powered glider that's going to be autonomously controlled and radio controlled. And they have permission from the Polish government to actually launch a glider in certain areas of airspace in eastern Poland. They actually flew a little test flight from their military base near Torun the day I was there, but the winds were too high to do the drop of the glider. But this is a high school project, and these students are absolutely brilliant and incredible. So that's similar shape to the glider that a program called STEM plus C, and I showed that talk about a year or two ago. Paul Kaup in Chicago is organizing an event this fall of glider drops from high altitude balloons at Spaceport America in New Mexico, and they have special permission to actually, he has gotten FAA certification approval on his gliders to be dropped from balloons from the stratosphere. So he brought the FAA inspector out and inspected each of the gliders and gave them an STA approval. So it is possible to do from certain parts of the country now, most notably Spaceport America. Here's some of their getting their balloons ready to launch outside. Now, they're doing an interesting thing in Poland. They're using the Vizsla RS-42 radiosonde, which is what they fly mostly in Europe for their Winds Aloft program. SP9UOB Thomas has decided he's figured out how to reprogram them to the amateur radio frequencies and has them doing teletype. And you can buy these fairly cheap on eBay. And if you want to get some more information on it, I can give you Thomas's email address. And he has figured out how to code it, and he's going to send me, I have one of these, they gave me one of these, and he's going to give me information on how to program one. So there we go, getting ready to launch 2 balloons, and they do multiple payloads like we do. And launch and recovery in the same day. They went about 100 miles downrange. Poland looks just like Ohio and Iowa. It's just flat farm ground as far as the eye can see. So they had a very easy non-tree recovery. And they came back and brought it back. And those are 2 of the Polish hams there in the balloon group in the area. And of course, there's the celebration after a good flight. And that's how they do it in Poland, and that's the most amazing dessert I ever had. It's made out of egg whites and sugar, and it's just like eating frosting. It's delicious.
Is that the ballet dancer one? Is the name of the ballet dancer?
It might be. I don't know actually the name of it, but it is really delicious.
Famous dessert.
Oh, okay, yeah. This is it's well known in Poland. Yeah. So I had a great time. Of course, it took 24 hours to get there because I had to go from Huntsville to Chicago and wait half a day to go through. I had to transfer to the international airport and then a 10-hour flight. All the flights to Poland tend to go from Chicago because they have a huge Polish community in Chicago. So, but it was a nice flight, and it was a 3-hour drive to get to Torun from Warsaw, and I had a driver take me there. And if you think drivers are bad here in the United States, these people would beat any NASCAR driver hands down. They are amazing. So that's what I have. You've seen the plastic balloon, and like I say, we're going to try and fly some of those.